The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us this morning for our webinar on petty cash management, made easy, increasing visibility. I'm just going to give it another couple of minutes for anybody who is running late, so if I could just ask you to be a little bit patient, and let's get things underway over the next couple of minutes. Thank you. Good morning again. Thank you for your patience. So my name is John Clifford, and I have been responsible this morning for organising and facilitating our session on SAP Concur, and I suppose more specifically our offering around petty cash management. So just before we go into the session, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. Typically, we like to have these sessions, I suppose, as engaging and as interactive as possible. So on the right-hand side of your control panel, you'll notice that there's a chat box. Please feel free to submit any questions during the course of the presentation, and also at the very end, where we will facilitate a dedicated Q&A session, which will be facilitated by myself and Gavdi consultant Simon Williams. This morning's session is also being recorded. If any of you would like a copy of the recording again, please feel free to reach out to myself. That's something we're happy to share with. On that note, I suppose again, thank you all for joining this morning. It really is good to see so many people on the call. Good morning to our friends in the Nordics and Baltics, and good afternoon to our friends in the Middle East and North Africa. So I'm just going to crack on. I know you're not here to listen to me, so just a quick outline of the agenda. As I said, we'll do brief introductions. I think I'll also give people an overview of Gavdi, who we are, for those who may not be familiar with us. Then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Simon, who will give you, I suppose, just a quick overview of what is SAP Concur and the different angles to it. We're then going to dive into a little bit more on the topic of petty cash management, and Simon then is also going to do a product demonstration, and we'll finalize this presentation and what I suppose just some key takeaways from this morning's session. And as I said at the beginning of the call, we will also facilitate a Q&A session at the end. So Gavdi, who are we? For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Gavdi is an award-winning SAP reseller and implementation partner. First founded in 1999, we're still owned and managed by our original founders, Mr. Søren Koppelhus. We're headquartered in Denmark, in Copenhagen, but I guess over the last 20 years, we've grown pretty extensively in the sense that we are now a global organization with 15 offices in 11 different countries. I like to describe ourselves, I suppose, as a total workforce management consultancy company, in the sense that we're very much aligned with SAP. Our background, I suppose, originally was in SAP HR. And when I mean HR, I suppose we talk about on-premise, hybrid, and more recently, I suppose, SuccessFactors. A part of, I suppose, our dedication to our customers was really just being able to provide a portfolio of total workforce management solutions. And that's where SAP Concur sits in really with our offering. In regards to SAP Concur, we've implemented over 40 projects in the last couple of years. We've 5 dedicated resources. But I suppose going back to us as an organization ourselves, I do like to describe ourselves as something of a boutique consultancy, in the sense that we've just over 285 colleagues. We've delivered over 500 HR projects. And as I said, more recently, dipped our toe in the SAP Concur space, because it's just a very natural fit for us and for what we do. When we've been recognized, I suppose, for our success around SAP Concur, more recently with being awarded a Pinnacle Award for Intelligent Spend Management Partner of the Year. So that's just a little bit about us. I hope that gives everyone a little bit of a flavour. And on that note, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Simon, who is going to tell you a little bit more about SAP Concur. Morning, Simon. How are you? Morning, Simon. Hi, Simon. We're having difficulty in hearing you. Sorry, just bear with us at the minute. We seem to be having some technical difficulties. Simon, you don't seem to be connected to your audio. Hi, Simon. Simon, can you hear me? There you go.
Yep. Sorry now.
Simon. Not at all. Apologies, everyone, for that. That's, I suppose, the nature of doing these things virtually. But thank you, Simon. Over to you, just for a quick overview of what is SAP Concur.
Okay. Next slide. Okay. Move that window out of the way. Okay, so the challenges with the world as it's expanding into electronic systems is we've got businesses trying to get employees to comply with the policies, and allowing the employees who see these wonderful technologies around to use these devices, and really that's where expenses come as sort of grown with all these developments. And what was just really a data entry for the front of the AP system is now become something much more practical for users to record their expenses as they go around, and for approvals to be done without the delays that there used to be from having to get back to your desk. And then once you've got your data stored electronically, the opportunity to analyze that data and see how things are matching up, or remove some of the fears that you might have, is also part of the benefit of storing everything. Next slide, please. Okay, so Concur's opportunity has been to bring together all these different functions. That's the opportunity, that's the investment they saw. And by moving to the web and the cloud has allowed a real-time connection between most of these applications, and also to see into some of that data, that was just not available before. It was just too expensive to go and get it. So what Concur's put together was really a best-in-class application, where what you're buying into is a quality system. We go into the next slide, which has got the whole story of how Concur really started from the beginning as an expense application, but as time went on and we were experimenting with mobile devices, the smartphone really took things to another level and allowed the application to work seamlessly with your web application. So you can switch between your browser and your web app, just instantly. Whatever you've saved on one is then available on the other. That's just the virtue of a web browser, web-enabled world. And then the rest of the whole systems can connect to each other. So on the left, we have the travel side feeding into the expense system. And even before that, we can do a request, so you get pre-approvals feeding in before you do your bookings. And on the right-hand side, we can then review what's been entered and make sure it's validated as it's fed into the accounting system. And then at the output end, we can report on that data. And then feeding in from the bottom, we have feeds from our exchange rates, which just make it easier when you do a cash expense that the exchange rate from a foreign transaction is already done there for you. And your credit card data is another huge win, pre-populating much of the entries and matching up to your travel bookings. So your expense report, again, is done quicker, and you don't have that feeling that, which receipts have you lost. The whole record is in one place, and that's the promise, and that's why it's a great system. We also have this benefit of VAT reclaim, which we did in the last webinar, a chance to get some of that back, because electronically it can do the work which would manually be too expensive to get the reclaim done. And on the very right hand side is the invoice application, which I think is as big as expense. That really handles a lot of transactions. And again, under one roof, you've got one login. In some companies, they have single sign-on. We'll get you access to all these applications, similar look and feel. And that's another improvement in your time spent not having to learn lots of different applications. Okay, next slide. So really the purpose of this webinar was to look at petty cash and how that fits into Concur. You go on to the next slide. Okay, so really petty cash was something we've tried to avoid, really. As Concur, we knew that what is really a cash advance is actually quite a lot of work to keep track of, and petty cash is always a risk that money can go missing or is not spent properly within the company policy. But it's not always possible to use your credit card. That's the simple fact. And we know Kazakhstan and Mexico, these are countries which are big cash advance users, and there are lots of reasons why petty cash, and I'm sure that's why you can't quite avoid it. And one of the most recent examples working in the Middle East then has been simply when someone needs a visa, that it's not so easy just to pay for that visa. Never, whereas handing over some cash allows that to be done, makes the trip easier to get started, and all we have to do now is keep track of this petty cash, and Concur allows us to do that. So let's look at how Concur can do that. If we move on. Okay, so the cash advance process in Concur does indeed store the transactions first of all, we want to have a float for it, and we want to label. We want to identify the custodians of these floats, because it's no good having multiple people in charge of it. It has to be one person. And also that conveniently means that we can record an expense against that person and then refresh the float as needed. So if we take £1,000 float, we also place a clearing account against that custodian on their employee record, and that clearing account in your accounting system will have record a balance then of $1,000 in this case, and that is an account that should clear down to zero as the money is spent. So what starts happening is someone starts to create some receipts, and those receipts should be stored obviously with the cash float in its secure box, and anytime there's an inspection, the receipts plus the cash should add up to the $1,000 float in this case. We can then choose at a certain point when that float is running down to expense those receipts, perhaps every month or on a time scale that suits the float. You would then put those expenses into report in the same way that you do any other expense report, but those receipts are then, those cash payments are then assigned against the cash advance. So merely by attaching your cash advance to your report, you will end up with those cash transactions being deducted from that balance, and that clearing account will be reduced by those transactions going through. And because you've assigned or allocated those cash expenses to the right business units and cost centers, they've now been accounted for properly, and any budgeting being done on those cost centers or those expense types is also being updated. Okay, so let's go into a demo of what the system can do. And so I've set up my mobile phone. I'm going to have to take over and share my screen.
You're doing that now?
Okay. Did my screen come up yet?
I can see your screen, Simon. Thank you.
It has. Okay, brilliant. Okay. So if I just log out of the Concur app, and in Concur I tend to use Notepad in order to save, because it's easier to do the but it's easier to type in your login ID.
Simon, sorry, we can actually just see your folder. We can't see the application at the moment.
Oh, right. So it needs to go onto screen 2, really. Perhaps if I just drag this screen onto here, that'll be easier.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Okay, we'll just do that then. Okay, so by choosing my my user account, I'm going to choose one which has got the Expenseit application first of all, because Expenseit is the OCR recognition technology that Concur has been developing continuously. Let's copy that. Gets me logged in. Okay, so what happens is when you have the Expenseit function, in addition just to the normal image capture, is this camera icon gets the word Expenseit at the bottom of it. And when I choose to use that, then I can take a picture straight away of one of my receipts. And the technology tries to shape itself up automatically. And so just by pressing the button, it takes a picture. And then you can use those little bars if you need to change the shape slightly. And then you click done. And first of all, it attempts to get the price right. Probably the most important thing is the amount. And then you can zoom in and see the relevant bit, and you can see it did get 544 on this receipt. And just by pressing on the 544, it accepts that. And then by clicking done, it goes away and analyzes the receipt, which is now quite a quick process. And so in a few seconds, it tells me it's ready. And already my 544, and it's tried to guess on the expense type. It's just unfortunate in this particular set of expense types is it's for meals or cost of coffee. There wasn't any choices because they used daily allowances and no meals. But what I'm going to do is just change it to a passport fee, which is more commonly used for petty cash. And then you can see that if I look at the date on this receipt, it picked up 7th of 11th as the date. Okay, it picked out cost of coffee and it picked out the location. And mostly it gains from experience of working with your receipts and where you are, and to make a good guess. So I can save my entry and I can go and put that onto my expense report. And my entry is already loaded up. And in this case, it was a UK expenditure, but my report is actually in euros. So my total report is 0.03, and that report is just ready to submit now. But I want to then show how you can use those expenses and then how they get put against the issued amount of money. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the web browser, move that out of the way, and log in as a different user. I need my basic user 2, that will do. Okay, that's logged in as my basic user. So if I want to request a cash advance, then because my user, so it's not every employee gets the chance to use cash advances, but by giving them that clearing account code on their employee record, lets us choose who gets cash advances and who doesn't. So I can go into cash advances and I can request a cash advance to start my float off. So it's just like doing an expense report. Cash float 3. Okay, and I'm going to request 1,000 of my currency, £1,000, and I could give more details. I could even attach a document if I wanted to, but I will now submit that. And my workflow for my cash float is it will go straight to an admin to issue that. It could go by my approval flow, my manager if I wish, but in this case, we short circuit the workflow and go straight to admin. I'll log in as the admin. Processor. and my processor now gets an extra screen. Well, they get an extra tool in this case, which is the company tools. It's not that either. Can't remember which one. Let's try this one. So my processor now gets a Cache Advanced admin screen, and I can look at all my, like I say, Cache Float 3, that's my application. That's the amount requested, and I can now decide whether that's something that's allowed, and if it is, then I can issue. So that's the term that's used. I can issue that money, and that's allowed that person to go and use that cache. So my job as a Cache Advanced admin is I can now send that money, usually by some sort of bank transfer to a bank account, and then they get a driver or themselves go to an ATM and go and collect that cash and put it in their strong box, ready for use as a petty cash float. So go back to my user again. Okay. So I can look at my cash advances, look at the position. And I can see my new balance has been issued, and I have a balance of 1,000 that I can use up. And now I can choose to, so if I've now spent, and I've now got some receipts that I need to convert back into cash to get back into my float, I can now choose to put an expense report together. So I can create an expense report in the usual way of a normal expense report. Petty cash receipts. Try and number it. This is more for my benefit than the system's benefit. The system has its own unique reference and date, but I can recognize this, and putting initials on is a very handy way. So I'm going to submit this report. Okay, and it will probably prompt me to say, do I want to attach a cash advance to this report? Petty cash receipts. Didn't prompt me. So I need to see which cash advances is being attached to my report. And it's not telling me that. the idea is that you've got to confirm that you've attached your cash advance to the report, and then when it allocates when you spend cash, it will automatically deduct it. So report details linked. There we go. So I add my cash advance, my float, my 1,000 balance to this report, and now when I set up my expense entry, and I'll just use up one of these available expenses, 544, add it to the report. It's confirming to me at the top at all times that my balance has now reduced now by that 544, 944, so that's what's left. And when I submit this report, I solve the problem with it. That's a business purpose. The system now knows that it is to deduct from that a clearing account code when it goes through to accounts. And if we look at the summary, we can see that that there's going to be 544 cash advance utilized. The company pays that 544, but there's nothing due to the employee and nothing owed to the company. So this is purely a balanced deduction from the that clearing account code. So that's achieved its purpose and of allocating this cash and correctly allocating it against the right expenses into the system, into the accounting system. But it means the system now knows what balance is left in my float. It knows what cash is there, and if I wish, I can then go and replenish that that missing cash. If say I get down to 500 left, then I can go and request another cash advance to put back the 500 that's missing. And the cash advance administrator can see exactly how much I've claimed back and what my balance is. And so when I request more money to replenish my float, then they can approve it to put my float back up to the 1,000. So that is the whole circle of the petty cash float, apart from one thing. If you close down or you change your custodian for that float, then the recommended process is that you put that money back in, close off the balance, and you can do that by a cash advance return, puts the cash back into the system, back to the cash advance administrator, and then reissue it to the new custodian. And that would be the best, that would be the neatest way of the new person taking over. So that's my demo. Can you go back to the, take it back, John?
Simon, yeah, absolutely. So I think then you were just going to recap, just I suppose, on some of the key takeaways before we go into the Q&A session.
Yes. Okay. Just all right. I can see you back at the main screen. There you go. Okay. So the takeaways. One of the key things is the policy, the rules, because it's a bit like miscellaneous expenses. It's easily misused, and so you need to be clear what the limits are, what expense types are allowed, and when it can't be used. So there's a list of those, and a good policy that we found from an educational unit wrote out a very clear policy on their use of their petty cash, and I think it's worth copying. So we're going to include that, John, in when we send that out with the PowerPoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I found that a really good listing, to set a sample of how you'd set that policy up, and make sure that your custodians were trained in looking after the money and how they did the cycle of recording it. But I think by recording the flow of the cash into your accounting system via an expense report is the neatest way of keeping track of petty cash, and also then having it reportable so that you know what it's being spent on, and you know, maybe there's some insight into the value of some petty cash, because it's not often, it's easy. I know it's been in the past, I've seen people have provided credit cards and just shut down on all cash advances, but then that's lost out on some of the abilities to kind of oil some of the business processes out there. So I think petty cash still has a place. Then the usage, well, I say the Cognos reports, that will actually help you get visibility on what's going on. And then the business purpose is necessary, because otherwise you won't know who actually that money was spent on. It's not all the custodian's responsibility. You need to know what that was spent for. And the business purpose field is probably the simplest one to enter, who's been using that expense. I think that was my that's all the takeaways we have for now. I think we're going to go into Q&A after that.
Yeah, thank you for that, for Simon. It's been very, very insightful. I think it's good to get a real-time view of the actual application and how it works. There's been quite a few questions, and to those of you who have submitted questions, thank you so much. I'm just going to go straight into them, just to be conscious of the time. The first question, and this is from Mo. Thank you for the question, Mo. And Mo is just wondering, I suppose, they're currently using SAP Concur, but he's just wondering, does petty cash management, does it integrate? I think I know the answer to this, but does it integrate with other SAP Concur solutions?
So which part of Concur?
Does petty cash management integrate with other SAP Concur solutions?
Okay, so really the petty cash is then just part of the cash advance that's provided with Concur expense. So it's not an extra, it's just included. And so then it fits into the whole world of Concur, which of course, being part of SAP, means that you know, the links to SAP and to success factors are also, you know, well understood. But Concur has always been a company that's worked with really, it's tried to work with every supplier in the world, because it wants to be integrated, and wants to, and no reason why, you know, Concur expense can't work with any accounting system.
Okay, and another question, and I think this is also probably reflective just of the audience and the attendees that we have on the call this morning. And this is a question from Louise. Thank you for the question, Louise. And Louise is just wondering about localization and localization around cash advance management.
Right, so the localization we usually mean by that is languages. And so all the standard languages that Concur have got on the browser are the same thing for cash advance. And the mobile, again, has another subset of languages. And so all of those are available. And you know, Concur does the bulk of the translation for their built-in config, you know, their application text. But all the configurable text is obviously words that we've put in English. Then there's a process of localizing all of that. So it's just a question of degree. And some people go the whole hog and do everything, and other people just do enough to allow people to operate. So yeah, localization is something that Concur understands.
Great. Good question here. Also here from Zaid. Thank you for the question, Zaid. And Zaid is wondering about the audit report functionality, and also how group policies is implemented.
So the group policies in Concur is really aimed at dividing up the fact that different countries have different policies, because of mostly due to government regulation, but it also from company to company. So that's just part of the design, is that you would identify where sufficient different in operation occurs to make the system group aware, as Concur uses that term, so that different users get access to the system that they need, you know, the part they need to see. So Concur has been designed that way. And then from an audit point of view, again, if it's a global company, you might need to be dividing up that work. But some of that can be done by the Concur audit service, and that steps in where they specialize in checking the receipts and doing that kind of hard work, which you might want not wanting to pay your own staff to do, but it's an essential part of making sure that everybody believes that you can't get away with just entering any old thing that doesn't match up to your receipt. That does need to be checked, and but you can use the random mechanism in Concur if you want to, and just check 1 in 25, and that builds up a picture of whether people are complying or whether there's a problem or not.
Okay, hope that answers the question, Zaid. Thank you, Simon. Another really good question. This one is from Osama. Thank you for the question, Osama. Simon, how do you record expense related to multiple cost centers?
Okay, so there is often a need to allocate an expense across multiple projects or multiple cost centers, and so that function has been built in, and it's something that not all the users necessarily want to do or understand themselves. So there's usually a check stage, which we call the back office or processor stage, where the processor is still able to categorize the allocation if necessary, so the business gets money allocated to the right cost center. And Concur goes another step when it comes to the approval of those cost centers, in that the approval can go to the relevant project manager, and so he only sees those expenses that need to be approved for that project, and that obviously targets the spend to the right place, the right people who need to know, and to keep track of budgets.
Okay, thank you.
So right from right throughout the system, right from pre-approval even, the system can divide up that spend, and so you can get a correct approval for it.
Great. Thanks for the question, Sam. I hope that answers it. And there's quite a few more questions. I'm going to take another 3, Simon, just conscious of the time.
Okay.
This is another really good question. This one is from Ali. And Ali is just wondering, in your experience, I suppose, in implementing a solution like this, what has typically been the employee feedback? Simon?
Yes, I mean, I remember an employee very, very keen to explain to me that when we take away someone's ability to use cash, often when we introduce Concur, it's an opportunity to streamline processes, and one of those options is when you put in a credit card, then it would appear that you no longer need cash advances, and but obviously the employees just feel a loss. And one of those things was pointed out that at various airports, especially on the homeward journey, all the credit card establishments, especially American Express, get clogged up with business travelers who are trying to use their card. And it's an advantage to have some cash at that point. If you can get some out of the ATM and just use it locally, then you can get yourself, if you certainly a shorter time at the airport, you can get yourself to a shorter queue. So that was one little thing that just highlights the fact that users out there are having to deal with lots of decisions about where to spend, and being tied to your credit card might not be good on occasions.
Thanks for the question, Ali, and thank you, Simon. That was a pretty comprehensive answer. That's great. Another question, this is from Osama. Osama is wondering, is there any approver hierarchy or authority matrix limitation?
Approver hierarchy for what? For all parts, or just the petty cash, do you think?
I would imagine it's just the cash advance section, yeah.
Yes, so the petty cash is a little bit more limited. It's really aimed at just going through 1 level or 2 levels of approval, rather than the full, project manager cost object split that you might have in the main expense part. So getting approval for your petty cash normally wouldn't be such a long workflow. In the case of petty cash, it's really a float that's been agreed, and the cash advance administrator is the person who will look after that. And plus, there's just an extra duty on them to go out and actually physically check that that money is still there. And so yes, it's the most complicated workflows are not in the cash advance mechanism. That's for sure.
And how about for expense approval? Is it the same, Simon?
But the expense approval and the request approval, they have the full workflow that Concur offers. That doesn't change. So what you're doing, as you saw in the demo, was that the cash advance is really assigned to a report, an expense report, and is just used up by being assigned to that report, and thereby the expense report is the same behavior as any other expense.
Great. And one last question, and thank you for the question, Wiswana. Wiswana is just wondering, I suppose, and you kind of touched upon it earlier, just in regards to policy procedure, and I imagine cash advancement is only as good as the policy procedure. Just in your mind, Simon, what does a good policy procedure look like?
Well, it's really, I suppose it's the training of the custodians is the critical part, is that, you know, it's easy to get, perhaps lose the discipline of keeping track of that cash. So as long as the custodians know the process, then they're the enforcers really to make sure that the money is being used in a way that helps the business. And it's just not, it doesn't become an invisible spend because it's not being recorded properly or receipts aren't being collected. So there is a discipline involved, and you know, and there has to be a regular check. So it's not something for free, but it could be measured by listening to the user experience. You know, how much sometimes cash is a much simpler way to pay for something than it is to try and get a credit card out, and the rigmarole involved in that. So there is a balance to be struck, but that's helped by having, you know, a clear statement about what can and can't be done. And I think a set of examples of expense types that have been working well, and also the ones that just shouldn't be done by petty cash.
Okay, I'm going to take one last question. Sorry, there's obviously a huge amount of interest in this topic. Yeah, great. Simon, and this is another question. And this question is from Mikhail. Thanks for the question, Mikhail. Mikhail is just, I suppose, is inquiring basically around usability. You used your mobile as part of the presentation. He's just wondering about operating systems in regards to integrate, I think, with, correct me if I'm wrong, with iOS or Android, or is there limitations?
Yeah, so Concur did rapidly focus on the iPhone operating system and Android as the two main players, and you know, but it is a specialized development skill, so there is, you can quite clearly see there's two separate teams, one looking after the iPhone, one looking after the Android, and consequently those development environments means there's slight variances between the two and the way they release their updates. But I do see a constant improvement going on, that it's obviously an area that we find the employees, you know, enjoy working with the mobile device, and so that there's constant development going on. And you know, with the new interface that Concur's done with Next Gen, I find that works even better with the Safari browser. So especially on an iPad, when you switch, there's one thing I found as a limitation: you can't be a delegate on the iPhone or the Android app. But if you use the browser on an iPad, the Safari browser, then it does work. You can use the delegates, so you can do everything on your iPad that you can do on your PC.
Okay.
In fact, one wonderful thing about the iPad is you can actually take a picture of the receipt from the iPad because it's got a camera built in, same as an iPhone, and you can record the receipts. And if you're an executive assistant, you can do those receipts for your manager, or some people work for multiple managers, so you can put the receipts in for those managers from your iPad, and you can't even do that from a PC. You know, try and take a picture with the camera on the top of a PC. It's pretty difficult.
Point. Good point. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for the answers. Thank you again for the demonstration this morning. I think finally, from myself, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time out to attend this morning's session. Apologies for the little bit of technological difficulties we had, but I think that can always be a challenge just around when we do sessions like this remotely. But thank you for your patience. As I said at the beginning of the call, we're more than happy to share a recording of this morning's session, our template around policy and procedures, or any of those who would like to see the slides. Please feel free to reach out to either myself or Simon. This is the second in a series of webinars around SAP Concur that we plan on doing. So if you would be interested in attending another one, you can follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we typically announce details of it. And on that note, I'd just like to thank everyone again and wish you all a very, very good day. Thank you.
Thanks.